Hello, friend. Welcome to Chapters on Armstrong Television. Chapters is a great show, and it offers you the opportunity to see and talk to and listen to authors, publishers, editors from all across the world. It's a delight to be here, and my name is Carter Seaton, and I'm your host. And today we have with us Kris Hall. Kris has a master's degree in playwriting from Rutgers University. He studied under Roger Cornish, who is an expert on British theater. While living in New York, he met his future wife, Kim, at a reading of his play, The Fabian Waltz, and we'll explain all that later. The feminist views of the Victorian characters intrigued Kim, so she asked to meet Kris, and they've been together ever since. And Inky, his cat, is his faithful writing companion, and the name by which his publishing company goes.
Yes.
Right. Welcome, Kris. We're delighted to have you and thrilled to talk about this book. According to your bio, The Fabian Waltz was first a play. Is that correct?
Yes.
And tell me how you came to write that as a play, and then later how you wrote it as a book, why you decided to do that.
Okay. I was looking for subject matter to write about, and I had realized that there were a lot of fabulous characters in London in the 1890s. George Bernard Shaw, Oscar Wilde. I could have put Arthur Conan Doyle in here, Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula, Joseph Conrad. If I wanted, I could have had special guest appearances by Mark Twain as he goes around the world giving his lectures. So there were a lot of literary riches that I could have worked with. I ended up pruning it down to Bernard Shaw, Oscar Wilde, and Shaw's best friend, Sidney Webb, and the women that they eventually married. So first I wrote it as a play. I tried sending query letters around to theaters around the country. I didn't have an agent, nobody would read it. So then I wrote it as a movie script. I was living in New York City. I took a course with something called Gotham Writers Workshop. The teacher of that course was so taken with the script that he optioned it and tried to sell it as a movie for about like 8 or 10 years. And he wasn't able to sell it. And time went by, and I'm living in West Virginia. And 2011, I was diagnosed with Burkitt's lymphoma, which is it's a form of cancer with a rather severe chemo regimen. One of the first things the doctor said to me was, there's a 5% chance the chemo is going to kill you. So that had me doing a lot of
soul searching?
Yeah, figuring what am I might not have as many years left as I had originally thought. So what am I going to do? And I decided to put some re-emphasis on writing. So I took the play version and the movie version, and I wrote Fabian Waltz as a novel. And that's how that came about.
All right, explain to us then what the story is about. The Fabian Waltz is an intriguing title, but it doesn't tell me exactly what this is about unless I know about the Fabian Society, which I do now, but I didn't then.
Yeah, the Fabian Society was a British mild-mannered political society, officially socialist, although maybe kind of socialist in the way that our Democratic Party is supposedly socialist today. But the story, and some of the main characters like Bernard Shaw and Sidney Webb were members of the Fabian Society.
The women?
Eventually became members of the Fabian Society. And the story is more the romance. We have romance between Bernard Shaw and the woman he eventually married, Irish millionairess named Charlotte Payne Townsend, and Sidney Webb and the woman he married, Beatrice Potter. That's Beatrice, not Beatrix. A lot of people have gotten confused with the woman who wrote the Peter Rabbit books, but they're two different women.
And Oscar Wilde and his exploits as well.
Oscar Wilde is in there as kind of a special guest character. He actually wrote a socialist essay after hearing Bernard Shaw speak. and I use that as the hook to get him into the story.
Okay.
Bernard Shaw wants to get Oscar Wilde and see if he can get him to write more socialist.
Okay, so tell us the synopsis. Where are they and what are they doing?
We start out in London, approximately, let's say, 1895, although I've taken events from throughout the 1890s and all put it together as if it all happened. Compressed it as if it all happened in one year. So they start out in London, and then eventually they go to the Fabians' summer cottage. Bernard Shaw and Sidney Webb used to rent a summer cottage every year and invite various people. So everyone ends up there. In this case, they invite Oscar Wilde, and romantic hijinks ensue. And eventually, in the summer, they go their separate ways, and we see how their various fates play out.
Some of this is written as an epistolary, letters, diary entries, things like that. Are those accurate, or are those fictionalized?
They are mostly fictionalized.
Okay.
I got permission to reprint a few sentences from the letters of Sidney Webb and Beatrice Potter. They were so articulate. I could have, done whole chapters based on their letters, but I would rather write my own stuff, not use them as a crutch. But there were a few places where it just fit perfectly. So yes, it's mostly me.
I see. What intrigued you about that time period?
It was more the characters than particularly that time period, although it is a time of transition. It's the Industrial Revolution has happened in England, and there's a lot of urban poverty that has come in, and laws haven't really been passed to alleviate some of the worst situations. And so that's why something like the Fabian Society springs up to fight,
Child labor laws.
All sorts of abuse. And Shaw and Sidney Webb and Beatrice Potter were people who seemed to dedicate their lives to try to making society better without any expectation of riches, any expectation of great fame.
Or running for office.
Yeah. They wanted to be, the Fabian Society tended to want to be behind the scenes and influence other political parties.
I like your term, mild-mannered socialism.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Did you find when you were doing your research that some of these ideas were also in Shaw's plays?
Oh, yeah. Well, he is known for putting in economic themes into some of his plays, which, economics isn't, when you think of the theater, you don't automatically think economic theory.
Right.
But his very first play, Widowers' Houses, had to do with rent and how it impoverishes people and makes the landlords into tyrants. Major Barbara asks the question, who helps society more? The major in the Salvation Army who gives people handouts that feeds them for a day, or the arms merchant who provides them with good jobs for a lifetime.
Right.
And of course, Pygmalion, the play which led to the basis for My Fair Lady, talks about the class system and how your accent stamps you, your social class in England.
Right. Did you ever live in London?
I have not. I visited London. I have not lived there for any long period of time.
And how about your research? Where did you do that, and how long did it take you to learn about these characters as well as the Fabian Society?
It was really intimidating.
I bet.
Because if you're writing, one of the attractive things about the story is that I'm going to be putting words into the mouth of Bernard Shaw and Oscar Wilde, two of the wittiest guys ever to speak the English language.
Right, that is pretty intimidating.
That would be, yeah. And so it took me a long time to read their plays, read their biographies, read their autobiographies and their letters, so that I could feel that I could do justice to them. And even then, I kind of had to trick myself to start. It was so intimidating. I couldn't sit down and say, I'm going to write the play. I'm just going to write a few write a little conversation. And then a little conversation turned into a scene, and a couple of scenes. Finally, it snowballed, and finally I ended up with a play.
That's good.
But it's scary.
Yeah.
And every time I went back to rewrite it, I mean, first as a play, then, I'm going to write it as a movie. I've got to go back and do some more research. Oh, I'm going to write it as a novel. I'm going to go back, do even more research. So it's been 30 years of research.
Wow. That's a long time.
Yeah.
To work on one project.
Yes.
Yeah. You really must have been dedicated to it. That's great.
Yeah, it's meant a lot to me.
Yeah. Does the Fabian Society still exist?
Yes, it does. I don't think it's super influential, but you can go online and find the website and stuff like that, and it's still probably trying to influence politics in England.
Interesting. Are there any lessons in that? You said it's sort of like what people say is the socialist kind of arm of the Democratic Party. Do those philosophies have some relevance for today?
Well, in every country, you always have a battle between conservatives or big business who want low taxes and minimal government, and people who would rather have higher taxes and have more of a welfare state to alleviate some of the misery of society. That's an eternal battle. So it goes on in our country, and it's still going on in England.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you said the female characters are true characters as well.
Yes.
So how did you know? Are there documents and letters and so forth of theirs that you were able to study, or did you have to make up what they said entirely?
Well, Sidney Webb and Beatrice Potter, the woman he married, had an extensive correspondence beforehand. And so it was easy to get her personality. Beatrice Potter was an extraordinary woman. She was a daughter of a wealthy family who did not have to do any of this. She could have had a very comfortable life, not doing anything. But she decided that she was going to work with the poor and started doing social investigation, checking out conditions in the London docks and in the London slums, and writing articles for magazines, and even dressing up as a poor person, as a poor seamstress, to try to investigate the conditions in the sweatshops. So she had a very strong personality. Charlotte Payne Townsend, the woman that Shaw married, was a little different. There aren't huge volumes of her letters and things. So at some point, I kind of had to decide on my own what her personality was going to be. And I decided to make her a Shavian heroine, someone who could stand up to Bernard Shaw, who has a very strong personality, and who would make a decent partner for him.
I see. Yeah, it's interesting. So what happened after this summer? There's a little bit of that in the book, kind of tells what the end of their, after they went back into London society and so forth. How did the rest of their lives play out? Did they continue to work for this Fabian Society all their lives? Shaw, for instance, and the other couple, they continued to do that? Yes,
they did. For their whole lives. Shaw eventually pulled back from a lot of active participation in politics. In the story, he's actually he's a vestryman, what we would probably call a city councilman.
Yeah.
But he eventually, as he became a more and more successful writer, he pulled back from some practical politics. Sidney Webb went on to he was actually a government minister in a couple of different labor governments. I think he was Minister of Trade in one, and something else. So he continued on, had a long, successful career.
Who did the drawings in your book?
My wife.
Horrible.
My wife did.
Yeah.
My wife did.
That's great.
Yes, she's quite an illustrator.
Is that what she does?
No.
In real life?
No, she's she works with computers for the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection.
Well, maybe that's her outlet for non-work stuff.
Yeah.
That's good. So this is your first novel.
Yes.
How did it feel to finally have it in print after 30 years of research?
It was thrilling. It was also surprising because I hadn't intended to do any self-publishing, and my wife had found the files on my computer and had the copies printed up without my knowledge, and it surprised me as a Christmas present.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
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 So do you have plans to write another novel?
I have another novel already written, at least a first draft. I may want to run it through my writers' groups again and get some criticism. And
Are you willing to tell us what that's about?
that's very different. I mean, it's historical, but it's a World War II commando thriller.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is very different.
Yes, very,
Yeah,
very,
yeah.
very, very different. That has
Right.
has a lot of action and stuff like
Uh-huh.
and stuff
And
like
what
that.
interests you in that?
I'm actually more of an action guy. It's the Fabian Waltz that's kind of the exception to what I
okay.
usually write, and that was only because I was so fascinated with Shore and Wilde and these particular characters.
Are those adventure kinds of thriller things, the things is what you read?
I read a lot of them. I try to read a lot of quality nonfiction though too, history, biographies and things like that.
Well, that gives you the background for the other,
Yes.
for the writing.
yes.
Yeah. What about another play? Would you ever do that?
Possible, although that's less likely. I've got, most of my other projects are not plays.
Where are you, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from originally?
I was born in California, grew up in Rhode Island, met my wife in New York City, then we moved to Los Angeles. We were out in Los Angeles for a few years and then came back here.
Because your accent is very confounding. It would be hard to place you.
It's a Rhode Island accent.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And what do you do, as they say, for a day job?
Oh, I'm a special education teacher in Winfield.
That's great. That's good. And I don't know what a hobby farm is. Your bio says that you and your wife run a hobby farm. Tell me what that means.
It means we have a lot of chickens and goats. That's
Just
ba-
for,
that's
just for
basi-
the fun of it. huh?
Yes, yes,
I see.
yes.
Okay.
Not making any money off it.
So that's not the same thing as a gentleman farmer. That's
No.
That's just for the fun of it.
Yeah.
Tell us how to get your book.
Well, you can go on Amazon, Amazon.com, or a lot of the other places you can find it. Hold it up. And if your book club wants to hear me speak and you're in the area, you can always contact me. I have a website for the Fabian Waltz. We had things, the Woodland Arms Retirement Community had used the Fabian Waltz as their book for 1 month, and I
good.
came and talked to them and had a good time.
How'd you pick the cover of your book?
I didn't. That was my wife.
Oh, yeah.
My wife was in
So-
publishing. She
so
was
your wife is really the publisher.
my wife's the publisher. She was a children's book publisher for for many years when she was in New York City.
I see. Speaking of Shaw again, do you have a favorite of his plays?
Pygmalion is probably the one that works the best.
If you studied playwriting, obviously you know kind of the way a play should work with rising action and all of that. So you're saying that you think that one does more than the others.
And also for theme.
Uh-huh.
The fact that it makes a strong statement about the class structure, without preaching,
Right.
without
Yeah, that's
through
interesting
comedy.
because if he can do those thematic plays and they're not didactic, then that's a real gift to be able to have a play that kind of gets the point across without being preachy.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about Wilde, Oscar Wilde. Did you find him to be just absolutely fascinating? Because I do.
Yeah, yes. Oscar Wilde was called, some of the people who knew him said that he was the best dinner companion, ever. Again, very intimidating to write about. he's got the two sides. He's got the public side, the charmer, the playwright, and he's got the hidden side, the hidden life that
Which eventually wasn't so hidden.
yes, which eventually brought him down.
Yeah.
And there's the mystery of why he was so stupid to actually sue the Marquis of Queensberry, when an awful lot of people were telling him, no, it's not going to work. No
Right.
good can come of this.
Right. Tell us a little bit about that part of the book, because that's in there. He was a homosexual, and he dated the Marquis of Queensberry's son
Yes.
and was in love with him. And tell us what happens.
Bosie, as the nickname of Lord Alfred Douglas, hated his father. His father, the Marquis of Queensberry, apparently was a very abusive, bad-tempered person. And father and son were at war. And Wilde got caught in that war. And eventually, the Marquis of Queensberry left a calling card at Wilde's club with an insult on it, something about posing as a sodomite. And Wilde tried to sue the Marquis of Queensberry.
For slander.
Yes, for slander. And of course, the Marquis of Queensberry immediately got private detectives to go throughout London and grab anybody they could to try to prove that what he was saying was true.
And how much time did Wilde spend in prison?
He did 2 years. He was sentenced for 2 years hard labor. He was not. He didn't. The entire 2-year sentence wasn't spent at hard labor, thank goodness, because he was told that gentlemen frequently don't survive, that kind of a sentence, who aren't used to it. But he came out and was a ruined man. He had to leave. He left England, never saw his sons again, his own children again, and began a kind of penniless existence in Europe and died in Paris.
Isn't there a play about that situation with Oscar Wilde in it?
I think there's more than one play with.
Because I have seen a play, and I can't remember what the name of it was, but he was the focus, and that whole scenario was the focus.
Yeah, there's several plays with Oscar Wilde.
Yeah, right. He was a fascinating man, and I'm sure he would have been a great dinner companion. Right. So your new book that you're working on, do you have any idea when that might come to fruition?
Well, like I said, I want to run it through my writers group one more time and try to perfect the thing. So that might be another year.
Can you give us sort of a quick synopsis of that, or would you want to save it for another time?
I have a German Jewish refugee whose family's been murdered by the Nazis, escapes to England, and is determined to go to war as a commando. Even at the start of the war, German Jews were interned as enemy aliens, and he will do anything to go fight, and of course eventually does.
Wow, that sounds like a fascinating book.
I wanted a character who was just absolutely as forceful as you possibly could.
Now that's going to
Single-minded.
take some research as well.
Yes, I read books by German Jewish commandos who'd fought for the British, and German security forces and secret services and all that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was fun to research
Yeah.
too.
And I'm sure you had to do research on the prison camps too.
Research is half the fun.
It is, yeah. You can get sucked into it, however. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's and with 30 years, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Well, it's been fascinating to talk to you. I'm delighted about this book, and I hope the viewers will take the opportunity to buy a copy and read it, because it is fascinating. It shows two great characters in our history, in the literary world, and should be something that everybody would enjoy.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kris. I think we're about out of time. Thank you all so much for being here. watching, listening to us, and stay tuned, stay well, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Connect with Chapters through email. Write to lp4@zoominternet.net. Chapters has a Facebook page at Armstrong Chapters. Like, subscribe, share, and comment. All Chapters episodes are available on YouTube. Visit the Armstrong Neighborhood channel on YouTube and look for a playlist of all the Chapters programs.